Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Leo Bottary is the founder and managing partner of Peernovations, LLC. As a popular author, keynote speaker, and a workshop facilitator, Leo is an instructor for Rutgers University and an opinion columnist for CEOWORLD Magazine. He is the co-author of The Power of Peers, How the Company You Keep Drives Leadership Growth Success, and author of What Anyone Can Do, How Surrounding Yourself with the Right People Will Drive Change, Opportunity, and Personal Growth. His latest book, and the topic of our conversation, is Peernovation, what peer advisory groups can teach us about building high-performing teams. Leo earned a BA from Jacksonville University, his master's from Seton Hall, and completed his doctoral coursework in organizational leadership at Northeastern. He's on a mission to help peer groups and organizational teams maximize their ability to make a difference in the world.
Excellent. Well, Leo, thanks so much for being on today.
Oh, you bet. Thank you for having me.
So Leo, when I was reviewing your book, I like how you were able to bridge experience from peer advisory groups and being able to foster or build up what you call high-performance teams. But before we get into the how and the meat and potatoes of it, I really want to start with definitions. And from your experience, what is a peer advisory group?
So first of all, and as you know from the book, I think defining terms is really, really important. The first one, I've basically discerned the difference between a group and a team, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of a group is that a group comes together basically so that each of the individuals can have takeaways for themselves or their organizations. A team works together either to achieve a collective goal or to develop a shared work product. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a different dynamic in there. Peer advisory groups, and of course, I worked for Vistage for 6.5 years between 2010 and 2016. They basically assemble and facilitate advisory groups for CEOs and key executives in about 20 countries around the world. Mm-hmm. And what these groups do is they come together basically to do what I talked about, what a group does. You have CEOs who share the common challenge, for example, of having to make decisions for an entire organization. Mm-hmm. They work in all different industries, but to have them come together, share experiences, share ideas, and learn from one another is really, really powerful. Mm-hmm. And key executive groups do very much the same thing. And my first book that I co-authored with Leon Shapiro called The Power of Peers, mm-hmm. Was really designed to look at how and why these peer groups are so powerful, and why they're so effective. Because in the scheme of things, too few people really take advantage of them and use them. And so the idea was, let's provide a narrative around that so that people can at least look at it and make it part of their consideration set for how they learn and grow, right? Mm. Which for most people is they read books or they hire coaches, they get consultants involved. They might go to executive development or graduate programs, things like that to help them grow. But
they have their place, right? They have a place.
Yeah. Oh, it isn't an either or, exactly. It's an and, but what we do know, and whether it's in school or whether it's at work or as part of a peer group, is we do learn better when we learn together.
Mm-hmm. So then marrying that, so how do you personally define high-performing teams? When you go into organizations or you see different, team structures, how are you able to decipher what is a high-performance team versus a not high-performance team?
So rather than walk you through kind of the linear, how we got there, I'll probably start backwards because I think most people can relate to this idea. If you look at a sports team that seems to always be competing for the championship all the time, they're either winning it all or they're always right there. You start looking at those organizations and asking yourselves, and of course, we interviewed a lot of people from top performing sports organizations like that. And what you find out is that for them, the goal isn't the championship. The goal is getting better every day. How do we do that? And if we're committed to doing that each and every day, then we put ourselves in a position to compete for championships all the time. So they do that, really great thing that is what we refer to in the book as the learning achieving cycle. So the idea is that we found that high performing groups and high performing teams have a robust learning achieving cycle. And that for us really defines success. This idea is that, again, we learn better when we learn together. The more we learn, the more we get comfortable with that learning, we give one another both the courage and the encouragement to act on that learning. And once we try those things, even if there's some trial and error, once we start improving and getting better, we want to do more of it. So great teams are constantly committed to, no matter how good they think they are now, they all know as high performers, there's just a little more they can squeeze out of themselves as individuals and as a team. And it's why those are the teams that compete for championships. It's those teams in business that create the best advertising in the world, the best products in the world, the best sales in the world, all of that. And that's how that's done.
Is there a certain cycle in terms of timelines for those learning achievements for it to go from learning phase to achieving phase? And the second to that question is, if the cycle does get faster with the more iterations of success, is there a certain velocity that we want to get to as a team?
That's a great question. I think it all has to do with the complexity of what it is you're trying to learn and implement, right? That would typically drive the velocity of that cycle as you describe it. But what we know is it's going on constantly, and it's going on multi-levels. It's not just we take one thing and we learn it and we go through the cycle and we take a second thing and learn it. We have a lot of things oftentimes going on at the same time. Some of it relates to our skills as individuals and as leaders. Some of it is about our teams, and some of it is about how do we as an organization as a whole continue to learn and grow. So I think it all happens very much at different speeds, at different levels, at different complexity. It's more about the commitment and the mindset to being committed to that becomes really powerful.
Yeah, the commitment factor is critical there.
It's huge.
So so I got the Kindle version of your book, and I took some screenshots of some of your diagrams because they're pretty helpful. But I know that you talk about there are 5 factors that you've from your research, from your knowledge, that you've seen in high performance teams. Can we dive into those 5 factors?
Sure. And basically these 5 factors, and really everything in the book, doesn't so much come from me. It comes from everybody that we've ever talked to over the last decade, basically, So when we talk about that learning achieving cycle, what we know is that doesn't happen by just putting a bunch of people in a room or on the Zoom, as it may be the case. It doesn't happen by accident, right? So what we found that there were 5 factors that also, by the way, operate in a reinforcing loop. The first one is just having the right people. And that becomes really important to figure out who are the right people. So in the case of the peer advisory group I mentioned before, let's say among CEOs, so the right people really kind of fits into 3 factors. First of all, you want to be a CEO who kind of shares the common challenge with everyone else in the room about what it's like to make a decision for an entire organization. Second, you have to have some shared values and behaviors about what it takes to be a good contributing member to the group. You're going to be there. You're going to be prepared. You're going to be open. You're going to be honest, vulnerable, willing to challenge, willing to be challenged by others, things like that. The actual list of values and behaviors or, priorities basically vary among the group, right? So part of what I do isn't really trying to give anybody a prescription, but it provides them a framework to get to where they want to be for themselves. But if they basically share the same role, if you will, or share the same reason for being there, share values and behaviors that they know are going to be necessary to making for a good group, then the third piece becomes the diversity. How do we make sure that we've got people in the room who have diverse experiences, backgrounds, however you want to cut diversity? It's age, it's gender, it's race, it's so many different things. But the more diversity you can bring to the table, obviously the better, as well.
The perspective.
So right people is key. Second is psychological safety. Google obviously has made psychological safety, a common part of our lexicon now. It's been around for a long, long time. But once, as part of Google's Aristotle project, they identified psychological safety as so key, it also parallels with the value and importance of psychological safety in groups as well. This idea that the environment is safe and that people can speak out, they can speak up, they can take risks, they can do the kinds of things that too often we don't do. They can be real with one another. As we know, whether it's social media or going to a cocktail party or whatever, everybody's got their best face on. Everybody's got their highlight reel showing up on social media. Everything's great, and
even in the workplace too. Like sometimes you come with a different set of like outer clothes, mentally speaking. But I really like the fact that you focused on this portion, because I think now, even going through what's going on in 2020, at the time of this recording, I think psychological safety is even more of an importance right now within teams.
I think it's huge. And I think one of the reasons teams have been that much more, quite frankly, effective, productive, and cooperative with one another is that rather than going to a central workplace, you get invited into people's homes and see what's on their walls, see the kids screaming in the background, dog jumping on someone's lap, all these things. It tends to get us to look at others, not just as fellow employees and coworkers, but as human beings. We can tap into our collective humanity in terms of who we are and what we're trying to do. And we're all just doing the best we can to raise our family and educate our kids, whatever it is. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it makes for a bit of more forgiving environment, but psychological safety where people can truly feel, if you're a leader and you're paying someone a lot of money, why would you ever want to say, well, I just want 60% of you, because unless you agree with me on certain things, I just want you to keep your mouth shut. Well, that's not helpful. That doesn't make sense. Right. And with psychological safety comes, I think, greater productivity. With groups, it happens because the more psychologically safe people feel, the more likely they are to bring some of the bigger issues, both personal and business issues, to the table, which are not only helpful to them and their work and their lives, but helpful to others as well. And in the workplace, again, you want a place where people are free to speak up and speak out and experiment and take risks. And,
that was actually an eye opener for me too. Like when you were able to link the bridge between, or the relationship between productivity and psychological safety, it's actually something that I highlighted. And, understanding, we can see at surface level, but also when you see it like within teams and organizations, you can understand the why and the how behind it. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and it's huge. And then the other connection really is when we go to the next part of this, which is a culture of accountability. This becomes really interesting as well. And a culture of accountability that I think is a bit different than what we often think of it as. We think of culture of accountability as being accountability to our leader, where we're constantly being hammered for whatever metrics we have. And we as employees are always playing defense all the time. The accountability we talk about is really team member to team member accountability. So again, going back to sports teams, we spent some time talking with Shay Ralph, who's one of the assistant coaches at the University of Connecticut. And this was around the time of the first book. She was also an All-American player. She said, if you think the coaches are tough on the players, you should see how they are with one another. They have really high expectations of one another and how we get better every single day so that we can compete for those national championships. The women who go to UConn don't go there because they as individuals are looking to be the leading scorer in the country. They can go anywhere to do that. They believe they go there because they can maximize their potential as a player, that they'll do that for one another, and that as a team, they're going to be unstoppable. So there's a high level of accountability among players that's very healthy in that they win and lose together. They laugh and cry together. They are very much one. And, one of the things that speaks to the ability to be able to create this is a leader who understands that they're not apart from the team. It's not like, here's me, here's my team. It's they are a part of the team. You are all in it. And that I have an accountability to the team as being part of that team, just as they have accountability to what we want to do for the team and for the organization. And it creates a very different dynamic, one that's much more about someone's sense of personal responsibility to bring their A game every day than it is feeling like they're constantly being put on defense. Now, that doesn't mean you can't challenge people. Really good people want to be challenged. They want to be coached.
Yes.
That's great. But I think to be able to do so as one really makes a big difference. And of course, the fifth factor there was really about leadership. And what we found time and time again, particularly with groups, and I think we find it in teams as well, is this idea of servant leadership, about leaders who are truly there to help the team and the organization be successful, not for their own self-aggrandizement, right? And for them to, I need this team to help me look good, that's not what that's about.
The greater outcome.
But also in addition to that, is they are also the steward of the other four factors. They're constantly mindful of, like, do we have all the right people that we need? And are they exhibiting the kinds of behaviors that represent the culture that we know will allow us to flourish? Do they enjoy psychological safety? Psychological safety isn't something you can just, you check off the box and say, got that, now we move on. It's a constant thing. The same thing holds true for productivity and accountability. Not that the leader is the enforcer of team member to team member accountability. That doesn't even make any sense. But they can provide resources and context and basically serve as the backstop, I think, for making sure that there's healthy respect and accountability to one another as team members.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it's able to relate back to another human at a different level, right? Like when you have a team and you know that you're accountable to the other person, and you have that feel of, like, not just reciprocity, but also camaraderie, like of your next team member. Like there's something special in regards to that. And the leader being the facilitator, that is probably one of the most critical roles, because without the leader, then some things may not be upheld and some things might fall through the cracks in that regard. But moving from those five factors into what you're talking about, it's Peernovation in action. So there's 4 different areas around that. From the book, you talked about people, perspectives, systems thinking, and ideas. So how do you mesh all of the things that a leader should be doing within the teams, or how the team should be working in regards to these 4, things in action?
Yeah, I think it's all about, if you go back to the workshop, it really fits into that. In that, what you want people to do is you're each having conversations around each of these factors and what it means with regard to what they want to create or what they want to do together. So because it's a framework and you can get people, one of the first questions, for example, I'll ask CEOs or team leaders to talk with their team about is ask them, what do they think is the difference between someone who makes it on this team and someone who doesn't? Because every CEO or every team leader I've ever talked to will share the experience that I've had on a few occasions, having owned my own company and run some operating divisions. And I've hired people where I'll get this person's resume. Awesome. Interview them. Great. Team interviews them. Perfect. We hire them. 3 months later, it's not working out. We're wondering what?
Yeah.
What's going on here? Why did this not work out? And there's some real lessons again, around this, going back to UConn women's basketball. Gina Auriemma basically said it took a while to kind of get to this place, but they started realizing that, among the other things, right, clearly they got to be great players and all of that. But when it comes to that it factor about what makes someone successful at UConn versus someone who should be playing their college ball elsewhere, was this idea of being a great teammate. And how they were able to, and one of the tests, if you will, that they were able to look at with that was they would watch these kids play high school basketball, right, before as they were being recruited. And they said they would pay attention as much to the couple of minutes that the coach pulled the kid off the floor to get a breather than they did anything she did on the court. Because he said there are basically 2 kinds of kids. There's the kid who sits on the bench, who throws a towel over her head and just gets herself completely rested, and then she waits to get called back on the floor, and that's it. Then there's the other player who's on the edge of her seat, yelling out instructions and encouragement and whatever she can to really be part of what's going on the floor, even though she's sitting on the sideline. So he basically said that the second kid, is the kid who's going to get recruited. End of story. And that kid is really rare oftentimes. And what they recognize is that commitment to being a good teammate is really one of the huge differences between someone who makes it at UConn and someone who doesn't. I think what's interesting about that is if in companies, if we identify what is that it factor or 1 or 2 it factors, first of all, it's identifying it. Secondly, it's interviewing for it, assessing for it. And then I think the final, more important one is the discipline to say no to what looks like a fantastic candidate, but
Yeah.
they're great, but they're not going to be great here. And recognizing that and passing on those kinds of people, and which is a good thing for them and for you, quite frankly, when you do that. But I think that as you have conversations about who are those right people, it does two things. One, it not only sets criteria for any new person that might enjoy the privilege of being added to your group or team, but it also kind of reinforces the commitment to one another that, yes, this is who we are and this is how we'll show up. I think the best illustration of what you were describing as far as that Peernovation cycle would be my time at Mullen. And Mullen Lowe, agency out of Boston, not committed to winning championships, committed to basically creating the best advertising in the world. If you walked into their offices, you would likely hear people kind of yelling at each other in offices from the background and go like, whoa, like what's going on here? Like, you think that these people are fighting against each other. And the reality is that they are fighting for the best idea. They actually have tremendous personal respect for one another. Everybody brings their A game. No one shows up to a meeting unprepared because your colleague is going to be right there all over it. So you want to make sure that you're doing your thing, right? You're not there to, fill a spot at Mullen. You're there to make a difference. And so getting people who adopt that mindset, who all show up prepared and do their thing, and they believe the more they challenge one another, the better the work gets. This happens all the time, for example, when they will do, creative sessions for coming up with new campaigns for a client. They'll have 20 or 25 people in a room, and they'll all argue and this and that. And the executive creative director is kind of outlining the key ideas. And all of a sudden, the campaign starts to take shape. You take it about as far as you can with that many people in a room. And next thing you know, everyone just sits back and goes, look at that. That is awesome. Look what we just did. So everyone recognizes, of course, that no single person could have come up with what transpired there alone. But second, so everyone takes a break, come back, everything's blank now. Start the process over. Second, third, fourth, sometimes a fifth time. In all the times I ever participated in that exercise, that first idea that everyone thought was so amazing never made the cut to show the client. Wasn't good enough anymore. So it constantly reinforced this idea that the more that we've got these great people, we all respect each other, but the more we challenge each other, the better the work gets. Now, keep in mind, that culture is not for everybody.
Yeah, it's high
so as you might imagine. So if you're interviewing at Mullen and it's determined that you have kind of a thin skin and no, probably this is not going to work for you. But if you can kind of buy into what that's all about and you can participate and you can play, it's great stuff. But I think that's as good an illustration of any about that Peernovation cycle you mentioned and what that looks like, and recognizing that it isn't just about linear thinking. To point to the systems thinking piece you brought up there, you really have to look at the whole. You've really got to be able to step back and look at actions and not just, I'm going to take this action and this will happen, but recognizing it in a larger context, because
the implications
you
of an action.
Unintended consequences and these other kinds of things that I think are important. But so having people wired, I think, to think that way, really drives innovative thinking, which, as I mentioned, that I think one of the best, most succinct definitions of innovation that I've ever heard is creativity realized. It's not just about the idea. It's not just about being creative. It's about the application of that creativity in a manner that is essentially operationalized, right? So, it's really fun stuff.
No, I love that. Well, Leo, for our listeners out there, what's the best place for people to go and learn a little bit more about Peernovation and yourself?
Sure. You can go to leobottary.com, LEOBOTTARY, or you can go to peernovation.co. And there's a ton of content on there for sure. Of course, there's our Peernovation podcast. There's also literally hundreds of articles and other such things, on the whole topic. Information on the 3 books, including the latest one, which is Peernovation, What Peer Advisory Groups Can Teach Us About Building High-Performing Teams. And I've got a lot of passion around this and I love it. And I think because of the fact that again, this is a framework and not a prescription. I
Mhm.
think people can really be able to see it and say, wow, this is something that will work for me and can work for my team. So I just encourage you to do that. And, I very purposely, by the way, other than the hardcover, I made the soft cover available right away and priced the ebook, so that people could easily share it. Like it's a no-brainer kind of thing where
Mhm.
you don't have to think, okay, do I have enough budget money to do this? This is like a really easy thing to do. So yeah, that's where they can learn more.
No, I appreciate it, Leo. You're doing good work, and we'll put those links in the show notes. Leo, thanks so much for being on again.
Hey, you bet. Thank you.